you know, how can I see all these talks, Duncan? They're all in different rooms, and you can't. So what are we going to do about that? So we are making an effort to this room. We're videotaping, I think, all of the talks in the auditorium. And in the other rooms, you may have noticed that we are using Camtasia to tape off the computer and tape your voices. So again, another encouragement for the speakers and the moderators to be in your rooms about 15 minutes ahead of time so we can get everything set up, and that the IT people can help tape this, and we will have that. And we hope to do something with that. What should we do with them? All those videos. We're going to put the keynotes on YouTube, and the very exciting keynote last night by Nicholas Carr will have a password protect. So if you each pay me about $15, I'll give you that password. At any rate, those will go on YouTube, the keynotes, and I'll send you information on that by email. And if you don't have email, tough. So yes, we have 30 sessions and 3 keynotes. And each of the sessions has close to 3 people in them. Some have 2.5 people. So do the math. We have about 90 papers. Very exciting for us at Notre Dame. We haven't done this in the architecture school before. And we're just thrilled at the response and all of you being here, participating, speaking, moderating, and we're honored to have you. Also, I wanted to mention that we do have some tables out near the entrance which have books by some of the participants. Some of the speakers have brought books to show you. Some are for sale, some are just so you can look at, and they all have pretty pictures. So please avail yourself of that. So for this next keynote, we have the pleasure to have one of my colleagues, Richard Economakis from the School of Architect, introduce our next speaker. Thank you.
Well, good morning. It is a great pleasure to welcome today's keynote speaker, Mr. Graham Wyatt, and to say a few words of introduction. I'm especially delighted to be able to do so, as I was privileged to work alongside Mr. Wyatt for close to 5 years when I was a young designer and he a busy associate and later a partner in the firm that he continues to serve. It's hard to believe, but that was almost 30 years ago, and I'm sure that, like me, he doesn't feel a day older. As you'll noted from the conference schedule, Mr. Wyatt will be speaking on the instrumentality of architectural models in the design process. I'm proud to say that I spent some time myself in the model making department of the office in the first months there, and I still have some nicks and scratches to prove it. Mr. Wyatt joined Robert A.M. Stern Architects in 1983 and became a partner just 6 years later. He leads one of the firm's 8 design studios and spearheading its focus on buildings for academic institutions. He's contributed to the design of buildings on 50 college and university campuses, including Harvard, Yale, Stanford, and the University of Virginia. He was project partner for the Stayer Center for Executive Education at the University of Notre Dame, recently completed. Mr. Wyatt's work has been widely published, and he has written on the design of academic buildings and specifically classrooms in the survey Building Type Basics for College and University Facilities, published by John Wiley & Sons in 2003. He's co-author of the upcoming Designs for Learning, College and University Buildings by Robert A.M. Stern Architects, which is scheduled for release later this year. His portfolio also includes master planning, institutional buildings such as the George W. Bush Presidential Center in Dallas, and office buildings for corporations, including Comcast, GlaxoSmithKline, and Gap Incorporated. Through his writing and public speaking, Mr. Wyatt urges a balance between technological progress and cultural continuity, arguing that the design of buildings must support both innovation and fundamental human aspirations. He begins each project with rigorous research. He and his colleagues then work back and forth between sophisticated design technology software and traditional hand sketches, as well as physical models, starting with rough plasticine models during the early phases of a project and evolving to larger and more detailed models during later phases. The stylistic diversity of Mr. Wyatt's work illustrates his belief that contemporary architectural expression should enhance the existing context, both physical and cultural, and communicate his clients' institutional missions as well as satisfying their programmatic requirements. This approach has enabled him to successfully add buildings to historic campuses alongside historic edifices by architects such as McKim, and Wyatt, and H.H. Richardson, and Walter Gropius and Marcel Breuer. Please join me in welcoming Graham Wyatt.
Thank you, Richard and Duncan. I have a microphone. Can you hear that now? Good. Thomas, where are you? More volume. Okay. Thomas has warned me that in the back rows you suffer from the gods of bad air conditioning and ventilating. So if you sit all the way back there and not up in the high exposure seats in the front, you've made your own choice. But I will try to speak up, and please, I know from the last session, if you're not hearing me properly, let me know. When Duncan first contacted me about today's session, he was pretty clear what his intentions were, but I warned him that I've never been one to follow the teacher's instructions. So I'm afraid I've gone today to something which is really my own personal obsession and central to my own practice. And Richard has spoken about this a moment ago, which is the use of architectural models, physical models, as design tools. And so I'm eager to discuss that with you today. And now a little bit of background, though, first. Make sure I've got the advance working. No. We had it all working so smoothly before. Can you help me with what I might be doing wrong here?
Trying to go back or forward?
Just forwards. Okay. Go to the very beginning. So we're not at the very beginning of the show. That's it. Let's start. Nope. Very beginning. Remember, we went through it. You never returned it to that's the last slide, not the first slide. Last night, Nicholas Carr was talking to us about how we're all slaves to technology.
Better?
Yes, there we go. Now we have it. So the use of models. There are different uses to models. These days, models tend to be used primarily by architects as shameless tools of promotion and sales. Nothing sells an architect's design to a client quite like an excessive model. And Oscar Wilde said, "Nothing succeeds like excess." And in this case, I would paraphrase that something like, the more excessive the model, the more successful the model. In this example, a detailed, illuminated, shameless model was central to the selling of the New York City World Trade Center site redevelopment, even though the actual buildings as they were built bear only general resemblance to what was shown in the model. And Philip Johnson would not have been shown, I think, on the cover of Time magazine holding a sketch of the 1984 AT&T building. A model somehow made his polemic of the moment much more physical and compelling than that. And those who just attended Janet Park's presentation will know that sketching and drawing wasn't really Johnson's strength in any case. this is really, those are recent examples that I show you. The use of architectural models as shameless tools of self-promotion predates our own era. Here is this wooden model, which I love, by Filippo Basile for his 1897 Teatro Massimo in Palermo. It's a theatrical production in its own right. It measures more than 8 feet by 5 feet. It's made of wood, and it consists of 4 hinged sections mounted on wheels that allow it to unfold dramatically, unveiling the building's interiors. Beyond that initial role, though, of models as sales tools, models have had historically a second really important function, and that is as a three-dimensional document of architectural precedent. The model room in Sir John Soane's home and office at Lincoln's Inn Fields, and I hope that many of you have now had a chance to visit that now that it's been reopened. It contains many models of this type, the architectural precedent type, actually as many as it does models of Soane's own buildings. Many of these models are imported from France and from Italy, and they show the signs of the frequent use that demonstrates or records their uses as sources of inspiration for buildings that Soane built and designed. In 1834, 3 years before his death, Soane transformed what had been the bedroom for his wife Eliza, seen here, that had been preserved since her death in 1815, into his model room. And the room featured this show-stopping, custom-designed central stand that displayed some, but not all, of Soane's 121 architectural models, and one of the largest collections of its kind. And chief among these are some really impressive models. There's a giant cork model of the ruins of Pompeii. There are 20 beautiful plaster models by the French modelist François Fouquet. Soane's model of the Temple of Neptune at Paestum, which you see here, was rendered in cork with terracotta capitals, and this was acquired by Soane in 1826. And interesting, I love this one because the model shows the temple in its ruined state as it was found then, including and documenting fallen stones around the plinth of the temple. Soane supplemented his library of models with architectural and sculpted fragments, both originals and plaster casts, and that collection eventually dominated his house, and these two figured centrally in Soane's work. At Notre Dame, you understand the importance of a cast room and know of its precedent at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. And I encourage you now to supplement that collection with models of full buildings, as Soane did, and as the Yale School of Architecture does. If Soane's obsession with architectural models was ever in question, Joseph Gandy's famous painting of, famous among architects, of 1818 confirms the important place that they held in Soane's work and life. Gandy's painting illustrates over 100 Soane buildings. Also, largely lost in today's world of digital documentation is a third important historical use of models, and that is their use as construction documents. This model of Thomas Jefferson's 1785 design for the Virginia State Capitol in Richmond was created not to sell the design to the client, that had already taken place, but to communicate it to a contractor. And Jefferson gets credit for citing the Capitol and for basic decisions about the design, but he entrusted the preparation of the final drawings to Charles-Louis Clerisot, a celebrated French draftsman. It was Clerisot who persuaded Jefferson to reshape the proposed Capitol's exterior to largely conform with the design of the Maison Carrée in Nîmes. In Intending to leave no doubt about the exterior design of this proposed temple of American democracy, Jefferson adopted the costly European practice of commissioning a scale model of the proposed building. And at Clearassaux's suggestion, he turned to the eminent model maker, French model maker, Jean-Pierre Fouquet, who happened to be the son of the Fouquet who had prepared Sohn's model. Many models. The plaster model of the Capitol arrived in Richmond late in 1786 with drawings of the design prepared by Clearassaux and his team. It was later repainted white, but the model was originally rendered in the intended buff color with inscribed faux joints. Every time the Capitol was repainted, so too Fouquet's plaster model was repainted. So embedded in the model then, this is really marvelous, you can see this on display at the Capitol. Embedded in the model is the entire history of the colors of the Capitol, including kind of lugubrious Victorian colors, is later revealed through Model Conservation Project, which was undertaken in 1994. Also a reproduction of the model, which illustrates how much the detail of the original had been lost over time due to hard use and repeated repainting. So the 1990s reproduction is on your right, and the original Fouquet model is on the left. In his letter to James Buchanan and William Hay in January of 1786, Jefferson justified the additional expense of the model by proclaiming it absolutely necessary for the guide of workmen not very expert in their art. Not a lot of confidence in the Richmond craftsmen. Another and decidedly different use of an architectural model as a construction document took place in connection with the 1959 American National Exposition in Moscow. A 180-foot-long framework for the U.S. exhibit was designed by George Nelson and Richard Barringer and was called the Jungle Gym. The Jungle Gym and the exhibit that it contained were intended to showcase, quote, the fruits of American labors for the public audience, a Russian public audience, at the height of the Cold War. The Jungle Gym model was completely independent from the glass pavilion building, which you saw in the last slide, that enclosed it. The Jungle Gym's design needed to facilitate easy construction, as it was going to be built entirely by Soviet contractors, and with limited resources and working on a very tight schedule. Also, a certain degree of flexibility was required, as the exact content of the exhibition weren't known until very late during the construction process. And here you see George Nelson and Richard Barringer and many members of their team at work designing the Jungle Gym and its network of exhibits in their studios in the United States. The 10-foot model, which once disassembled, was shipped to Moscow and was used as the principal construction document for the Soviet laborers who built the Jungle Gym on site. There were drawings, but there are a series of fabulous photographs. Here, intent worker with screwdriver in hand looking at the model. The completed Jungle Gym, as seen here, is arguably a full-scale model built on site. The design created an overwhelming atmosphere that enveloped visitors with a maze of displays in all directions. The fourth use of architectural models, and the real focus of this presentation, is the use of models as design tools. During this symposium, you will hear much about the importance of hand drawing, and while hand drawing remains essential, in my opinion, as an evocative and gestural method of both expressing and developing design ideas, it is not a substitute for modeling. In our office, new employees receive model making instruction, some of them here from Notre Dame, and the office maintains a 7-person professional model shop, and above all, models play a central role in our design process. So let's visit our office for a moment in New York and see design models at work through the lens of 2 case studies. First, our two new residential colleges at Yale University. A little bit of background. For those of you who are not familiar with the Yale campus, it seems appropriate to set the stage, highlighting the unique way that Yale was built and the particular Yale institution known as the residential college. And I'll do this before I show you how models were essential to our design of the two new colleges. Each undergraduate at Yale is a member of one of 12 colleges. Each college houses a closely knit social group of between 250 and 400 students who are supported by dining hall and libraries, lounges, recreational amenities, a resident head of college. It's not just a residence hall, it's a major academic and social undertaking. Each Yale college surrounds courtyards and quadrangles with entrances to the students' residences off those courtyards. And Yale skyline is punctuated by towers. The use of the entryway system off of courtyards eliminates corridors and allows the residential portions of the colleges to remain extremely slender, really domestic in their scale, typically less than 35 feet from outside wall to outside wall. The colleges share a largely consistent architectural rhythm, scale, ratio of glazing to solid wall, and even though three of the colleges are Georgian in style, Gothic is the dominant architectural language and the essential DNA of Yale. 6 colleges are Gothic. One is an artful combination of Gothic and Georgian, and the most recent 2 are Eros Saarinen modernist interpretation of Yale Gothic. In short, the residential colleges is a specific building type, loosely fashioned on the colleges of Oxford and Cambridge, but with its own unique Yale-ness. So as we started work designing the 2 new colleges, now named Pauli Murray College and Benjamin Franklin College, we looked at relevant precedents from Oxford and Cambridge and a few American institutions, but above all, we looked at the work of James Gamble Rogers, the architect of Yale colleges, 8 of them, in fact, and the prime mover of the collegiate Gothic tradition at Yale. The design of each Rogers college is grounded in tradition, but wholly inventive, and Rogers' convincing invention created a campus beloved by students and alumni, and for us, an important source of precedent. If we were to design new colleges that would be instantly recognizable as members of an existing family. The new college's location did not make this family resemblance natural. The existing 12 colleges, which you see here in gold, are closely packed near the historic core of the Yale campus, while the 2 new colleges are located to the north of the historic Grove Street Cemetery in an area that had been seen as remote, is still seen as remote by undergraduates. Simultaneous with our own programmatic analysis of the existing colleges, we built scale models of each, both to understand Rogers' careful, considered massing strategies and as complements and components of a working model representing the central portion of the Yale campus. We also spent much time understanding the scale of existing spaces at Yale in comparison to our site through comparative analysis using drawings, you see one here, transparent overlays, you'll see that in a moment, and above all, models. For example, since a pedestrian public passageway between the colleges was required by the city of New Haven, we assessed the scale of similar passages around campus, and we assembled prototype colleges, which you see here, not actual designs, but straw men, by cobbling together, collaging elements, in this case courtyards, from the 12 existing colleges. And here we're really showing our sources. You can see where they come from. This strategy allowed us to understand the carrying capacity and the scale of the site and the possibility for including multiple courtyards in keeping with the existing colleges. Design for us is pragmatic, and it often begins, almost always begins, with quick study models in modeling clay. We use this technique in combination with drawings and computer modeling based on our experience that these three techniques used in combination are far more effective than any single one of them used on its own. So a few words about clay or plasticine for those of you who are literalists. Modeling clay is available in various consistencies and colors, and like the selection of an appropriate pencil, the choice of the correct clay is important to its effective use as a design tool. Some are softer, some are harder. Our favorite, my own personal favorite, is number 2, Roma Plastina. So I'm sorry to turn this into a vocational course, but if you're going to do it at Notre Dame, there it is. The selection's been made. Clay is a practical and forgivingly imprecise design tool. It's, in my mind, the 4B pencil, which is my favorite pencil, of model making. It can be quickly reshaped, sculpted, and reoriented during a design meeting. Far more than drawings, it results in actively social design sessions during which many participants express their opinions, and options can be developed and assessed quickly, and the process is documented with photographs and with videos. Yet, clay's imprecise malleability is actually deceptive. Once you've chosen a suitable scale for your design model and estimated the appropriate average floor-to-floor height, an appropriate amount of clay can be determined by weight or volume. Here's the scale in our office. Use too much, and you've exceeded your program. Use too little and you haven't met your program. It's as simple as that. And if you have a fixed budget, you know how much you are over or under budget by. And by the way, that's not the number from Yale. That's a different project. Our early clay design models are often studied through the use of transparent overlays. Remember, I mentioned that a moment ago. And these allow us to understand the scale, in this case, scale comparisons with existing residential college courtyards. So you see the hands, 3 different sets of hands there as we overlay a transparency comparing a proposed courtyard with a precedent courtyard. And as I mentioned a moment ago, the free-flowing design discussion that occurs around a clay model, in my opinion, is really far superior to what can ever happen around a set of drawings. For the Yale Residential Colleges project, models of individual buildings were built into a single large campus model that taught us a great deal about the organization and scale of the entire Yale campus and about Rogers' planning devices, and allowed for quick analysis of axial and visual connections. You see a couple of those here within the shifted New Haven street grid. Here, studying that same topic, the visual axis of York Street on the other side of the cemetery is represented by a taut string used to determine the appropriate location of Murray College's tallest tower. So this is a simple and powerful design tool. Yale charged us with the design of new colleges that were consistent in their architectural expression with the existing colleges, but there was an open question as to whether the colleges should follow Yale's Gothic or Yale's Georgian precedents. And both languages are spoken at Yale and both enrich the story and the history of the place. So we went through a cost analysis and we determined that actually both were achievable. That's a separate lecture than this one. We selected Gothic largely because it was the dominant style and because of the nearby Gothic buildings on Science Hill. As the clay models were developed, our team pinned on first scaled elevations of other Gothic colleges and later scaled sketches of our own elevations. Again, a simple, fast, intuitive tool. Given the complex geometry of the new residential college site, the Gothic language proved to be particularly forgiving, with much of the relaxed, idiosyncratic composition expressed in the elevations deriving directly from the program and planning. At each scale of design, we looked back at our chosen precedents, comparing these to our own evolving design and applying these to our models. And here you see, love this photograph, a sort of Potemkin village of other residential colleges, all drawn to scale on hand for rapid comparison. Although many imagine Yale as a predominantly stone campus, in fact, stone and brick are mixed liberally, with brick representing a substantial material component, especially in the vicinity of our site. And we studied the application and the distribution of these two materials around the Yale campus carefully, perhaps even obsessively, and applied the lessons that we learned to our own designs as they developed. Only once we were finished with these studies and with many rounds of those clay design models that you saw, did a representational model of the schematic design finally emerge with elevations printed directly from our Revit model. Moving into the design development phase required study at a larger scale and a higher resolution of detail, and our models also grew in size and scale. Here you see in one of our war rooms the quarter-inch scale design development model, almost 20 feet long, that was in front of the 16th scale schematic design model that you saw a moment ago. As we moved through the design development phase, this model kept a team of up to 40 people working together effectively. The continuously evolving model facilitated design decisions and was a valuable tool, allowing us to study a vast array of design development issues while keeping our clients informed about changes in the design that were difficult to communicate by other means. Members of our team were assigned to a courtyard or a subset of buildings within the overall composition and were charged not only with design responsibilities but also with model making responsibilities within that zone. Each of the new colleges, several towers, were considered carefully in relationship to the scale and character of other important contributors to the Yale skyline. The Marist College Tower, at approximately 192 feet tall, will be roughly the same height as Rogers Hall of Graduate Studies, which you see here immediately to its left. And it will be slightly shorter than Harkness Tower at Branford College, which is the symbol of Yale as much as any building is. These comparisons were made using drawings, as you just saw, but more tellingly with models, endless models. And note that the variety of models here, some are clay, some are foam core, some with drafted elevations, others with sketched elevations. Many of these are at the scale of the design development model, and at certain times were actually inserted into the model. If anything proves the power and effectiveness of this physical model, it's a comparison available to us today, photographed as the building which design develops on site is photographed and is compared with the model from 2007. Each of the college's many courtyards was designed as an outdoor room, studied and experienced in 3 dimensions. Elevations and sections and perspectives were useful tools, but only large models were up to the task of allowing designers to experience these spaces before they were built. Caught in the act. How do these buildings' many elements relate to each other and work together to create a sequence of spaces? These are the very issues that physical design models allowed us to address. In addition to being practical and efficient in our selection of design tools, we are not Luddites. At every step during the design process that I've just illustrated, our physical models proceeded in parallel with virtual models, first in SketchUp, and then in Revit and Digital Project. At one point, Autodesk, who worked with us closely, told us that our Revit model, and here you see only the Murray College portion of it, was the largest in the world. I'm not sure it's a distinction that still holds, or that we were even that proud of it at the time. The Revit model was exceptionally useful as we managed information about elements such as doors and windows. Here you see a virtual tool that we developed to make sure that fire doors in the dormitory areas were properly located. These types of visualizations are indispensable to our team and our contractor, and they're part of the design process, but this is not conceptual design. This is a powerful and useful parallel tool to the ones that I just showed you. Some components were too complex for Revit modeling, so we also used Digital Project, a parametric modeling software from Gary Technologies, and we applied this software to the complex geometries of archways and bay windows, for example. This software allowed us to study and document Gothic profiles that had been developed first in hand drawings and next in physical models. We used these models to generate both the detailed construction documents required and also to supplement these drawings with three-dimensional visualizations assisting contractors and fabricators. We also used the software for the tower, for example, both to develop details and to represent a prefabrication and construction sequencing strategy for this complex design component. Prefabricated panels for the tower were shipped to the site from a fabrication plant in Quebec using brick that was fabricated in Pennsylvania and including in limestone from Indiana, which was hand-carved in Ontario. Over 400 pieces of carved stone and cast stone ornament were distributed throughout the colleges. Each of these pieces was drawn by hand. Most of them were modeled in plasticine. You see that here on your left-hand side. And all of them were documented in our Revit model. Now, I don't want to leave you with the impression that we only modeled in clay and foam core or by using computers. Before construction started in the college, we also modeled using actual building materials at full scale. I hope this model could be used as an entry to our construction trailer, but somehow I wasn't able to pull that off. But it still exists on a lot 3 blocks away from the colleges. We studied all the primary exterior materials and details, corner conditions, bays, buttresses, and so forth. But I must remind you that although this looks like a building, like the building itself, it is in fact a design model. It's built full scale using actual materials as a tool to facilitate our design process. And eventually, of course, we modeled the entire project at full scale on the site. The second, much quicker case study that I want to share with you today is a very recent project in our office, in addition to the McCann Athletic Center at Marist College, located in the Hudson River north of Poughkeepsie. The building's program includes a gymnasium and fitness center and other programmatic complements to an existing athletic building. Like Pauli Murray and Ben Franklin colleges at Yale, models figured importantly in the design of this project, which is still in the schematic design phase. So this is sort of ripped off the drawing board, so to speak. The photograph you see here is of a couple of our earlier buildings at Marist College. As I did at Yale, it seems appropriate to set the stage a little bit, highlighting the evolution of Marist College's campus character and some of the architectural influences originating in the greater Hudson Valley before showing you how models have been important to the design of this addition. The character of the campus is defined by its origins as a Hudson River estate, and the remaining historic buildings from that estate period have rustic stone walls and this distinctive red brick window trim and surrounds. Here you see recent projects on the Marist campus by our office, including on the lower left, the Hancock Center for Mathematics and Computer Science, a number of new entrance gateways into the campus, a student center, a music building, all of which build upon the historic character of the place. This is Marist College today, highlighting recent and current projects by our office. And here, at the bottom of the screen, is the McCann Center, in addition, located on the northern side of an existing building. Again, we used clay study models to study a variety of massing strategies rapidly. What you see here is the product of a couple of hours of teamwork. We studied the new addition in the context of the site and the existing box-like gymnasium. And as at Yale, we eventually moved to larger models and different materials, but at each step of these models are tools of design intended to develop and facilitate creative design thinking, not as presentation tools for our clients. So now let's go back to our office for a moment and join the project team at work.
Well, the use of models is really very much akin to sketching in 3 dimensions. And it is particularly helpful when you are dealing with an addition to existing buildings.
I don't think the right model actually was this farther out there. Yeah. And this is not nearly as long.
So it's really helpful to us to have everyone on the team instantly judge what they like.
Is the updated entry. Yeah. But the one on the left is updated everything else. So I may try to bring that into this.
And you'll make that last cut, and there's a nice proportion, and then all of a sudden everyone on the team says, hey, this is pretty nice. Gets the results pretty fast.
Well, I wonder whatever this system is doesn't. Do you think that this thing could be shorter?
It's a way of collaborating on the side. It's not in your head, it's out there. And there's something really good often about just getting out of 3 dimensions and going to elevations.
And retail styles. I think that's nice. And cut this back. That's the cafe.
It causes you to think about proportion in a different way.
There. The senior. Okay. Yeah, right now it's a 9.
The beauty of models is they're just another tool.
See, I like this. I like the little opening that sneaks up there. Yeah. Maybe it should be the other way around. We really do want that.
Trying to work out the massing of this fashion and arts building. Looking not only at the massing, but now looking at what the elevations look like. It's really useful to see them more than one face at once.
So you want me to replace it?
So marking that up and raising the windows and seeing what that building might look like with some future remaking of one half of the existing building to get a sense of how it changes actually the feeling of the proportion of the volume.
I'll make a bigger entry piece.
The rendering is what the client will use to tell what the building is going to be about. And models, you just see it more instantly. And it's an interesting thing for the designer to look back at the evolution of a project.
Oh, right. Yeah. This is good. Yeah.
So, back to Notre Dame, fellow architects, teachers, scholars, students, roll up your sleeves and reach in. The buildings and landscapes that we design are physical, they're 3-dimensional, and I hope I've made a compelling case today for why the design tools that we use should be also. Thank you very much. Thank you. And I think, Duncan, Richard, we have time for questions if there are any. Or did I overwhelm? Yes.
The workshop session, policy, everybody, that was all in-house. How often is the client or one set of clients brought into those kinds of sessions where it's not just about presenting something and taking a look at it, including them in the process of seeing how long it's taking, seeing how the other designers that are part of the project. Is that part of the process, or is that less so, or does it depend on the clients?
Being respectful of the acoustics of the room, I'll repeat the question, which is how often are clients brought into this process? And the dangerous trade secret is that that's a very effective way of working with clients, and one that clients find to be really exciting, many of them. And so when we can, at the right moment, we will bring them in, and there is nothing quite like discussing options and rapidly prototyping options in clay in front of them. Now, I will say that that's a dangerous thing to do unless you've thought your own design process out ahead of what you're actually showing. But good question, thank you. Others, Janet.
I'm just wondering, what are the steps you're taking with the design process before you get to that making phase? Like how much survey, analysis of the program, et cetera. How long do you think it takes you to get to that beginning phase?
How long does it take to get to the beginning phase of producing those models that I showed? That varies tremendously from project to project. Today's discussion is about the use of models as a design tool, and so I focused specifically on that piece. But before we have those design sessions, we undertake a really rigorous analysis of the site, of the program, of the precedents. In addition to having an in-house model shop, we have an in-house research department, and we will research our projects really thoroughly. And in the war room setting, you may have seen in the background, a lot of that is pinned up on the wall. So that before we start cutting in clay, we know what we're doing. Also, I know the clay looked very rough there, but we do have scales which are specially made for our office with the end cut off, so you can measure precisely the height. A normal scale has a stub in the end that doesn't allow you to do that. So we do take very seriously the research that goes into this, and then a certain precision as we're working. Yes.
Is there any role in the laser cutter or a 3D printer in your process? Have you guys looked at that as your next step in model making, or are you going to stay with
We have 3 laser cutters, we have 4 3D printers, we have a full woodworking shop and the model shop, so we have a lot of those tools, and we do use them. They can be valuable in the design process, but not in that loose, they're not sketchy, they're not the 4B pencil in my mind, which is the reason that I focused on today on plasticine and on those large, rough foam core models. But we do use those tools quite a lot. We tend to use them in the design development phase when we're looking at the more detailed refinement of a building. But they do get heavy use. Yes?
And just at the end of the presentation, it seems as though you must take the client through a real height analytical educational process as well.
Yes, so the question is we take the client.
I understand building type.
Yes, taking the client through an assessment of the building type. Some of our clients understand their building type quite well, or they think they do, but we always go through our own process of making sure that we understand their building type and presenting it back to them. Sometimes we teach them things they may not have known, or we see it in a different way, or if nothing else, it elicits a conversation which is useful. But that gets to Janet's question of a moment ago. This assessment of building type is something that we're really focused on. This throwing the clay around is not just an exercise in scenography. It is studying close relationships between appropriate programmatic functional solutions in the interior of a building and the form that it takes on the outside. We have, for example, an extensive detailed database of classroom types that we apply to our academic buildings. Other questions? Back here.
Did you check out the original process of John Campbell with Rogers?
Yes, we did. Actually, I was thinking about that earlier today in one of the earlier presentations. James Campbell Rogers used precedent extensively. He did not travel to Europe or to England. He did not see Oxford and Cambridge before he started work on the Memorial Quadrangle. He did go later. He collected postcards, and he had a really extensive collection of postcards of those colleges. And he did work somewhat in physical model, but as far as we can tell, not nearly as much as we had suspected before we started the research. Duncan.
Grant, fantastic lecture, even though you didn't talk about what I wanted to do. No. Speaking to that point, again, there's that beautiful plaster, like very finished plaster model of something, Harkness Quadrangle, is that it? By Rogers?
Yes.
Beautiful tower, maybe Harkness or the other tower, and fantastic plaster with all the detail and so on. Do we have any evidence of little cardboard models or anything more kind of rough and early that he did?
No, there's no evidence of physical models. There are a lot of drawings, including sketches, and he had an end of his talented team. It wasn't just Rogers. He was also a master delegator, but not of physical models.
And do you think there's a great project like General Pope earlier, where he redesigned Yale in kind of a Gothic fashion and came up with all these great schemes? Do you see much influence on Rogers of that Pope set of drawings, perspectives, and so on?
I don't know the answer to that. I know what Pope was brought in to do one of the colleges, and I know the plan you're talking about. Rogers had started working in the Gothic mode before that Pope plan was prepared, not at Yale, but at Northwestern and other places. So I don't really know about the relationship between the Pope plan and Rogers' architecture. There's another question over here, am I right? Maybe I've answered it. Yes.
Going in the opposite direction, are there any project types that you've experienced where the model hasn't been as useful as well? They just said, that was maybe not necessarily a waste of time, but not as productive as we had hoped. Like you showed some great examples of where the model works great. Are there some examples where it hasn't worked as well? And maybe there are other tools that are better suited for it.
Plasticine models don't tend to work very well for interiors projects. There you go. The fact that I'm getting some laughter suggests that you actually understand why. Physical models, part of the reason I showed the jungle gym is that big physical models for interiors, I think, are very powerful and useful tools. So it is, again, a question of using the right tool. But we use the plasticine modeling technique for every one of our new building projects, ranging from single-family residences to corporate headquarters to, as you saw, residential colleges. And we've done that together. Yes?
I'm just curious to know, did you use the similar sort of process when you did the Steyer Executive Center here on campus?
Yes. Yeah, for the Steyer Executive Education Center, through the wall there, we modeled the entire DeBartolo Quadrangle, including the Performing Arts Center. We went all the way to the football stadium and pretty much up to the Morris Inn with big context model like the one that you saw at Yale. And we rapidly massed out a series of options in plasticine before we even came to our interview, and then continued thereafter. And we also looked at modeling of that entire block, of which the Steyer Center is only the northern half, because we wanted to demonstrate what that block might hold in the future. Yes?
You focus on the design process, the use of handcrafted models. Is there a place in the process where digitally produced models, physical models, also come into the play, just like the digital media comes into play later in the process with the building?
Well, recently we've been finding that 3D printed models are a useful proof of concept in the design development phase. So example which is currently on my mind is the addition and renovation of the main entrance of a really fantastic Art Deco building in Lower Manhattan, and we were to put on a new entrance and a canopy. We modeled it first roughly in clay with sketches using a technique similar to what you saw. We then used the laser cutter and put together bigger models, and finally we 3D printed from a computer model what we thought was the final design, and it was a very good way to test it, and we determined then that there were certain specific details that could be better. But I think the proof of concept is the way I would describe those models. Others, great discussion, yes, right in the back here.
You say modeling, and the early processing modeling, what role does lighting play? Do you manipulate the lighting to test things during that process?
We do. We use a lot of software to test the movement of daylight and the sun, and you all probably know those programs, but we do the same thing in a simple way. We've got a big spotlight on a tripod, and you probably noticed, although I didn't point it out, we always put the model base on a Lazy Susan, which you can buy from a Chinese restaurant supply store quite inexpensively. So we have a bunch of those around our office, and you put the model on top of it, and it allows a team to rotate the model quickly and look at it from different vantage points, but also to move it around, crudely, I'll admit, simulating the movement of the sun during the day. And that was, I didn't mention it, but it was a huge issue in the design of the residential colleges at Yale, where Rogers very artfully put lower buildings on the southern sides of the quadrangles, and he masses up to the north in order to maximize natural daylight in the courtyards and quadrangles. We used the same technique, and we tested it first with a big, simple spotlight on a clay model, and then eventually we tested it using SketchUp and using Revit. Very important, thank you. Other questions? Yes, Richard.
As this modeling process is an integral part of your design process, for instance.
Initially in the early 1980s, when I started working in the office, we worked a bit more in cardboard for our early models than in clay. And I have to go back and check that. It's a great question, but I think it's 84 or 85 we started working in plasticine. And now we have required classes. Anyone who's a new employee has to take a model making class because it's not the model makers who are making the clay models, it's designers, it's partners who are doing it. So we want to make sure that people really know how to do it. But I think it's been about 30 years that we've been using and refining this technique. The process of scanning the models, and I didn't show that, but we have a laser scanner. And so you can scan the model and bring it into a virtual form and then paste elevations on in a computer. In SketchUp, that's relatively new. The process of photographing, and you saw that, photograph with an iPhone, print it out, sketch over it. That's probably the last 5 years or so. Kind of stupid, crude techniques, totally powerful. They're really effective.
It certainly seems like it would enhance the ability to collaborate as the firm grows.
Yes, as a collaborator, if I understand what you're saying, as a collaboration tool, the process has been really useful. And it means that young designers, young employees, interns, get engaged in the design process in a way that I think is much more difficult when designs are developed only with drawings. Yes?
Models assume that the client is hovering in the air a lot, but how do you deal with the person on the street, physically, the person who's 6 feet high?
Yes, I have a real concern about that. I think that there is a tendency to look at the models excessively from above, and as architects, I think I'd like to say that we can compensate for that, but we do frequently get right down at the model level. We raise the models up to the right level, and we photograph them. We not only with the iPhone, where you can get quite close to the ground, but we have a model scope camera, which is calibrated so you know exactly how far you are above ground, and you can come and place it on the model and photograph it. So for example, that comparison, looking down Prospect Walk toward the Marist College Tower, which I showed in the design development model, and then you saw it actually on site. One of the reasons they look so similar is that was photographed from 6 feet at quarter-inch scale off the ground in that model. It wasn't just a quick snapshot. So we try to be very scientific about that. How are we doing? I've exhausted you all. Thomas, thank you.
What a wonderful talk.
Thank you.
You would do it, man.
Use the clay, Duncan. Use the clay. Thank you all.
As long as it's Italian clay, I'm fine with it. So thank you. What a great morning we've had. We're just warming up. We've got some wonderful talks this afternoon. But just to remind you, so we're gonna go down. If you've registered for the conference, in your